Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ba'd. So, welcome to this new class about the four Imams. It's very common for people to hear the word madhab. How many of you, sometimes they say mazhab. How many of you have ever heard this word madhab before? Just raise your hand real quick. So, quite a few people, most people in this room, by 90%, have heard this term madhab. Madhab means school or school of thought. And it's referring to a school of thought in Islamic law in terms of how to interpret things. And whenever you talk about a madhab, it's one of four schools of thought: Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali. So many people have heard these terms before, and if not, at some point in your life, you probably will come across this term: Hanafi madhab, Maliki madhab, etc. What does that actually mean? Who were these people? And where do these terms come from? Why are they even called that in the first place? So, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the lives of the founders of these madhabs or schools of thought. And so, for example, the Hanafi madhab means it's a school of thought founded by a man by the name of Abu-Hanifah, or Imam Abu-Hanifah. The Maliki madhab is a school of thought. It's a way to understand and interpret the Quran that was founded by or is ascribed to Imam Malik. So it's called Maliki. So we want to understand who these people were and why do they have a school named after them. We're not going to go into details about school and should we follow a school, and that's a different class. This class is going to be about who these people are and what were they like and why were they so important and why do they even have their own name attached to a school of interpretation of the Quran and the Sunnah. So the reason why we're going to go through them is three main purposes. First of all, we all need role models and we all need heroes in our life. There should be people that we look up to. And in the modern day, we have biographies of people that people study their life and they look up to them for some accomplishment that they've had. So, for example, there's biographies about Enzo Ferrari, the guy who invented Ferrari, or Steve Jobs, the former CEO of Apple, or Jeff Bezos, or Bill Gates, or civil rights activists like Malcolm X, or Martin Luther King Jr., or Nelson Mandela, or Muhammad Ali, sports player, or Khabib, or somebody like that. People look at they look to people who excelled in one aspect of their life and they say, I want to know more about that person's life. What was that person like? What did they do? How can we find them to be very interesting, and then you look up to them and you say, wow, they've accomplished a lot and they were really amazing in what they excelled at. And so classically in the past, people have studied the lives of leaders, of warriors, of poets, of businessmen, of scientists, scholars, many, many different people. And so when we go and we study the life of somebody like these imams that we're going to become, an imam means like a scholar in this context. When we study the lives of these type of people, we can either try to be like them in the great things that they accomplished, or we can at least admire them. There's a statement that says, if you can't be like them, then at least love them and admire them. And so we can't love and admire somebody if we don't know what they did. We don't really know who they are. So this is the reason, number one, why we study things. Number two, we should know our own history. It's very important for people to understand the history of Muslims, because some people are in this frame of mind that today we, in the 21st century, we're advanced. And we have computers and technology, and we have AI, and we have airplanes, and we have space shuttles. And people of the past, they didn't have any of the technology we have. They're not as clever as we are. They're very primitive, backwards, foolish people. And some people have this view of the world because they encountered people today and they say, wow, we're so smart, and everyone in the past, they were so dumb. And so one of the reasons why we study history especially when it comes to individuals in history, is you're going to realize that these people are very intelligent. They were very clever, even though they didn't have the technology that we had in terms of society. But they were a very advanced society for their time. And sometimes also, people will encounter some Muslims in their life, maybe some Muslim scholars today, or maybe not even scholars, like pseudo scholars, and they have a bad experience with one or two of their Quran teachers or somebody that they met, and they're like, you know what? All Muslim intellectuals and scholars, they must be like these people, and these people are not very good. And so you have a negative taste. Some people have a negative taste, and like Muslims, oh, they're not really. I haven't had a good experience with them. The people who are very clever, all these agnostic, atheist professors in universities, they're the smart ones. So, by studying the past, you'll realize that no, there were some really amazing, intellectual, very smart people who were Muslims, scholars like these people, and you begin to undo some of the biased thinking that you have. And that's the second reason why we study this history. And the third is to go beyond these labels. So you will find many people in the world today, they say, I follow the Hanafi school, I follow the Shafi'i madhab, or I follow the Maliki madhab. But then when you say that person says, I follow the Maliki madhab, meaning you follow some of the interpretations that Imam Malik had favored, and the school is named after him. But when you look at his manners, you look at his character, you look at how they debate with other people and how they argue and they say, your madhab is wrong and my madhab is right and you this and you that. Was Imam Malik like that? Did he behave like that? Do you act like Imam Malik? You say you're a Maliki, but you don't act like Imam Malik. You say you're a Hanafi, but you don't pray like Imam Abu-Hanifah. You used to pray throughout the night. You don't have that kind of character and manners. So it's also an example of once we know what these people were like, people who claim to ascribe to their founders will see whether they really are ascribing, and you can see for yourself, and I can see for myself, whether we're really following the example of these people or we're actually not worthy of having that title of, oh, I follow Imam Abu Hanifa in what? A few of his opinions, not in his generosity, not in his courage, not in his righteousness, not in his business dealings, not in all other aspects of his life. So it's really important for us to get a reminder for ourselves about what these people were like because they were great role models. Now, when we go through their lives, it's not always easy to reconcile the different accounts that you'll find in some different books about their lives. Because what happens is any figures like this, people exaggerate sometimes about their lives. So people who love them in history, some of their top students, not all of them, some of the students, they were overzealous and they praised their imam, they praised their teacher like almost like they're a prophet. And then other people, they disagreed with these imams, they criticized them like they're Satans. And so it's kind of hard to piece together a narrative that's very balanced because you will find some of these extreme both side stories on all of these imams. But what we need to do is what we're going to try to do is get the generally agreed upon picture about what these people were like, and we'll be able to see a little bit about who was Imam Abu Hanifa. He was a businessman. He used to pray a lot. He was extremely generous. Who was Imam Malik? Imam Malik used to say, when he was asked many questions, he would say, I don't know. Many people, they say, I follow the Maliki school. But if you ask them a question, they'll always give you an answer. They won't follow Imam Malik and say, I don't know when they don't know. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was such a brave person, a courageous person. He was tortured. I mean, he went through a lot of difficulty. Many of these imams went through a lot of difficulty. So we're going to learn some things about their life. So let's begin with the first imam, and these are in chronological order. So the first imam in terms of chronology was Imam Abu Hanifa. So Imam Abu Hanifa, let's just talk an overview about him. He was a jurist. A jurist means, the word in Arabic is called faqih, which means he excelled in the field of fiqh. And fiqh means a deep understanding, meaning a way of interpreting the Quran and hadith so that you understand what Islam is telling you to do. So I'll give a simple example. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he had an opinion. He he had an interpretation that became popular. He's not the first person who ever came up with this, but he had an interpretation that when it comes to making wudu, when it comes time to wipe your head, it is sunnah, it is recommended that you should wipe your entire head when you're making wudu, like the Prophet, peace be upon him, did. But then he also came across some hadiths, which are authentic, where it said that the Prophet, peace be upon him, had a turban on, and when he wiped his head, he wiped the front part of his head, and then he wiped the rest of his turban. So Imam Abu Hanifa, and I'm oversimplifying his argument, it's a very complex argument, but his interpretation was that based upon these hadiths and the way that the verse in the Quran is there and has the letter ba, in the Quran, he says, my opinion, my view, is that the minimum of the amount of your head that you need to wipe is 1/4 of your head. If you wipe less than 1/4 of your head, your wudu is invalid. You should always try to do your entire head, but if you don't, the minimum is 1/4. And that's a very significant opinion. The other Imams had different opinion. Some of them said less than that, some of them said much more than that. You have to wipe your whole head. That's an example of an interpretation which is called the science of fiqh. So Imam Abu Hanifa was a faqih, he was a specialist in the field of fiqh. Dozens of books have been written about his life. And if you find many books throughout history, you'll find these biographical dictionaries, and there's entries in most of them, so many entries, hundreds of entries in different biographical dictionaries or encyclopedias that talk about his life. If you go through Islamic history, there are very few people that have as many biographies written by Muslims about any other Muslim. Imam Abu Hanifa is one of the top. You find the most biographies about his life, which shows how much people have loved him throughout history. So the Hanafi school or the Hanafi madhab is named after him. The Hanafi madhab today and in the past was the most widespread legal school or madhab in the entire world. 3 major empires officially adopted the Hanafi school. The Abbasid Empire for a very large period of time, the Ottoman Empire, and the Mughal Empire. The Hanafi school was their official state law, and they had books, they had textbooks, and they said, this is the school that we're going to be following officially. Today, the Hanafi school is prevalent in Central Asia, all the stans, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, all of that. It's prevalent in China, in South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, in Turkey, in Egypt, in the Balkans, Bosnia, Albania, all those places, Russia, as well as in Syria. According to Professor John Esposito, about 45% of Muslims in the world today follow or ascribe to the Hanafi school of Islamic law. That's the most widely followed school in the entire world today. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he was given the honorific title of Al-Imam Al-A'zam. This is his nickname, which means the highly, highly respected Imam. And we're going to find out why he got that title. So let's begin with his early life. So let's talk about where he lived. He lived in Iraq. Okay, he lived in Iraq and he was born in the year 80 AH. AH means after Hijrah, right? And that is the year, according to the Christian calendar, 699. So what was going on in Iraq in around the year 700s, right? In around the 700s. After Islam came into the region of Iraq, it was a melting pot. There were people of different races, different religions, and there were a lot of different even sects and groups among the Muslims. There was a Shia group, there was a Mu'tazilite group, there was a Khawarij group, there were a bunch of different groups, and there was a lot of debates going on. It was a very cosmopolitan society. It was also a society where there's a lot of intellectual confusion because there were just so many groups everywhere. And so people were having lots of debates, there was a lot of confusion, and there were 2 main cities in Iraq at the time. One of the newly formed cities, city of Kufa and the city of Basra. There was no Baghdad, didn't even exist. So it was a very prominent region because when Ali, the fourth Khalifa, became Khalifa of the Muslim world, he relocated his Khilafah or his Caliphate to the city of Kufa. And so over 1,000 Sahaba, companions who met the Prophet, peace be upon him, they settled in this region of Kufa. So it's a very significant place. And when Abu Hanifa was born, the Umayyads were the ones who were in charge of the Muslim world, and their capital had moved to Damascus. So they were in Damascus, but Kufa and Iraq was still a very important city and a very important source of everything, trade, civilization, everything. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he's born in the city of Kufa in the year 80 AH. He dies in the year 150. And he pretty much stays his entire life in the city of Kufa, even though Baghdad is built in between while he's alive. His name was Nu'man ibn Thabit ibn Zuta. So ibn means son of. So his real name is Nu'man. And he's the son of Thabit. His father's name is Thabit. And his grandfather's name is Zuta. Zuta is not an Arab name. Zuta is a Persian name. So he is from Persian ancestry. He's not an Arab. And there's a very important lesson that we learn here. It's that he becomes one of the most famous and most respected Imams in Islamic history, and even while he was alive as well. And he's living at a time, he's born at a time where the Umayyads are in power. And the Umayyads were known, some of them, they were known for being like Arab nationalists. They used to promote only Arabs over non-Arabs. And what's interesting is, despite the fact that that's the environment among many Umayyad rulers, not all of them, but quite a few of them, people like Imam Abu Hanifa, despite his ancestry not coming from an Arab clan or anything like that, he still was able to be widely popular and widely successful despite whatever government policies happened to be there at the time. So his grandfather, Zulta, probably accepted Islam, and then he moved to Kufa. And he moved to Kufa when Ali was the Khalifa. Ali was the fourth Khalifa. You have Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and then Ali, the fourth Khalifa. He was a Khalifa, and he moved his capital to the city of Kufa. Now, this is an important lesson as well. So Zulta, he moves to Kufa. He has accepted Islam, and then his son Thabit is born. And Thabit was born a Muslim. Zulta was not. And then his son becomes Imam Abu Hanifa. So what we're talking about is what type of Muslims were there at the time. They were Muslims who were born into Islam. There were Muslims who converted to Islam in one generation. And then there were those who have been Muslim for one generation, for two generations going back. Who was Imam Abu Hanifa from? He was from somebody whose grandfather was a convert. His grandfather accepted Islam. And that's interesting because basically within this second generation, they become the people of power. They become the people who are leading the Muslim community. And that's an important lesson because sometimes people have this idea, oh, you know what? Your parents were just accepted Islam. I go back 7 generations of Muslims. You can't be in an important position because you're kind of still new to Islam. There was no concept like that. That's a modern concept. That concept was not there. And the second lesson here is that a lot of these people who were not from Arabia, Persians, sometimes people accuse Islam and they say Islam was spread by the sword. It forced other people to become Muslim because there was invasion. They took over the Persian Empire, the Sassanid Empire. But at the same time, how do you get your children and your grandchildren, this didn't happen, but if you converted somebody by force, how do you convince them to not only remain Muslim, but to become the leader and to sacrifice everything, their entire life for the cause of Islam? That shows that a genuine conversion has taken place. And so that's what we find when it comes to people like Imam Abu Hanifa's father, like Thabit when he became Muslim. So Thabit is actually born in the city of Kufa, Abu Hanifa's father. He's born in the city of Kufa. And so Ali was the Khalifa. And what used to happen is it was a custom at the time, maybe especially among Persians, that they would take a child, a baby, and they would go to somebody very important and say, please make dua for my child. And sometimes you still see people doing this. So Zulta took Thabit, the father of Abu Hanifa, as a baby, went to Khalifa Ali, said, I want you to make dua for this child. And so Ali made dua for him. And so that's when he was first born. So we know this incident in history. And so that's the first thing we know about Thabit. Abu Hanifa's father, the only thing we know about him is Ali made dua for him when he was a little baby. The second thing we know about him is that he was a silk merchant. He used to sell silk and he had a very successful business. Other than that, we don't know anything about Abu Hanifa's father, except that he had a son named Nu'man. And Nu'man is Abu Hanifa. And he becomes one of the most famous Imams in the history of the world. What's the lesson? The important lesson is you don't need to be from a prominent family in order to be successful. It's your own effort that you put in, your sincerity, your dedication. If you become something important, don't people sometimes get trapped into, well, I can't achieve much in life because that other person, they have 3 generations ahead of me and they're going to be privileged and there's a privilege of this and I'm underprivileged. This mentality, we don't see this manifesting. People who are willing to put in the effort, they will find that the success comes from Allah and failure will come from Allah, even no matter how much effort you put in or how many family connections you have. So it's an important thing we have to remember. Nobody knew Abu Hanifa's father. We don't know anything about him except that there was a dua made as he was a baby and he was a silk merchant, just a normal businessman. That's it. And he was a nice guy, born as Muslim. That's it. So Abu Hanifa, when he grew up, he met at least 3 companions, 3 of the Sahaba. And this is significant. So he met Anas ibn Malik, who died in the year 93. He met Suhail ibn Sa'ad, who died in the year 91. And he met Abu Tufail, who died in the year 100. So there are 2 terms that people might want to remember. The term is Sahaba, which means companions of the Prophet, people who met the Prophet, peace be upon him, when they were a Muslim. And the second term is somebody who met a companion, because it's nice to have a one-on-one connection with somebody who's encountered the Prophet, and then you encountered that person, you talk to them, you learn something from them. So the second generation, they're called at-tabi'in, or the tabi'in in plural. So Imam Abu Hanifa, because he met 3 of the Sahaba, 3 companions, he is known to be a tabi'i. Why is this significant? Like, why does this matter? Because all of his other not rival, his fellow teachers who have their own madhab. There's many other people who have their own madhab. None of them are tabi'is. None of them had met a single companion. So Imam Shafi'i never met one of the Sahaba. Imam Malik never met one of the Sahaba. Imam Ahmad never met one of the Sahaba. And there's other madhabs that most people don't know about. They died out. But there were other madhabs. Imam Awza'i in Syria, he had his own madhab. He never met a companion. Hammad ibn Zayd in Basra, he had his own madhab. He never met a companion. Thawri, Imam Layth ibn Sa'ad in Egypt, he had his own madhab. He never met any of the Sahaba. So Abu Hanifa is unique in the sense that he lived earlier than all of these other Imams who started madhabs, and he actually met 3 of the companions. So his nickname is Abu Hanifa, and his real name is Nu'man ibn Thabit. So where does the name Abu Hanifa come from? So Hanifa, Abu means father of, and Hanifa is what? The funny thing is, nobody knows. Did he have a daughter or a son named Hanifa? Probably not, unless he had one and died in infancy. So people have all sorts of theories. Why is he called Abu Hanifa? Some people said, Hanifa means ink pot, and because he used to write so much, and because he was a scholar, maybe it's that. Someone else said, no, it's because Hanifa meant this and it meant that. The reality is, nobody even knows why he's called Abu Hanifa, and he's one of the most popular Imams in the history of Islam. What lesson? All these theories came out later on, but nobody knows. What is the lesson here? The lesson is people didn't care about going into irrelevant details of his personal life, and he never cared to share. This was not important. They've narrated volumes and volumes of his teachings. We have so many volumes about all of his opinions and his views and so many things. Nobody cared to actually mention why he's called Abu Hanifa. None of them. Because they focused on what mattered. And sometimes what people do is I want to know what's going on in your family. What happened in your household? Did your son do that? I think I saw your daughter doing this. Who cares? None of that's important. You don't need to know somebody's personal life. And the Muslims of the past, they didn't care about that stuff. They cared about what was valuable in the person's life, and they transmitted that. They didn't care about the other stuff. So we don't even know why exactly he's called Abu Hanifa. There's so many theories that no one really knows. His occupation. So he followed his father in business. So what did he do? He was a silk merchant. He used to buy or maybe manufacture silk, and then he would sell it. And he was doing great. His business was very successful. And it was very common, just like it is today, that when somebody's in a family business, they're going to have their children take over that same family business. It's also very common if someone is in one profession, they're going to try to get their children to go into the same type of profession that they're in as well. So Abu Hanifa, he did exactly that. He started selling silk, and that was his business, and he's making good money. Now, what was he like when he was young and he was a businessman already? He's probably maybe in his late teens, maybe early 20s. We don't know exactly, but old enough to run a shop, run a business, make some money. But he was from a good family. He was from a wealthy family. And one of the things we know is that wealthy families of people who used to live in big cities like Kufa, the Muslims had a tradition. If you're from a wealthy family and you're not like a desert dwelling nomad, but you're in a city, one of the things that they would do is they would try to get their children to memorize the Quran. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he grew up in that environment. And so, of course, they knew Arabic as well. So even though he's Persian, he speaks, Farsi or whatever the language was, and he speaks Arabic as well, and maybe some other language too. So he memorized the Quran at a very early age, just like other people who are kind of in the upper middle class circle. So he's coming from an upper middle class family, maybe upper class, you could even say. And so he was just a normal guy. And he was in the shop, he was in his business, and he was in the marketplace, and he was making money, and he was trading. He's not like many of the other Imams we're going to talk about, where their parents sent them to an Islamic school and said, I want you to become a Muslim scholar and I want you to study. He was not like this. His dad was a businessman. He was a businessman. He was just going about doing his thing, making money and trying to keep a halal, but he had the Quran memorized. So he mentions a story of what changed his life. So he said one day he passed by the house of a very famous Imam in Kufa. His name was Imam Sha'bi. He was a well-known scholar. And so Imam Sha'bi, he called him in. He said, come here. He thought accidentally, he mistook him. He said, you must be one of my students. So come on and let's talk. Go ahead and ask me any questions you like. It's always nice to have a student come and visit me. He goes, I'm not here to visit you. He goes, well, what are you doing here? Where are you going? So I'm going to meet that other guy. I'm doing business with him. So I'm just walking by. He happened to randomly walk by the Imam's residence. He goes, I'm on my way over there. I'm going to do some business transaction. So Imam al-Sha'bi, what could he have done? He could have just been like, oh, that you're one of my students. Okay, go, get out of here. Imam Sha'bi decided, I'm going to spend a moment with this man. And he said, you know what? You seem like you're a pretty smart guy. Which scholars do you go to? Which imam, because there were many different study circles. Like imagine different masjids have classes. So he's asking, which classes do you attend? Which imams do you sit with, and which students, which circles do you sit in? He goes, I don't sit in any circles. He goes, which imams do you go to? I don't go to any imams. He goes, that's really sad, because I can see that you seem like a very smart person. And it's such a shame that you have this intelligence, but it's being wasted because you don't go and sit in any of the scholar study circles here in Kufa, and you have this opportunity. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he tells later on in life, he said that interaction with Imam al-Sha'bi, it sparked something in his heart. And he said, you know what, this guy's right. What am I doing with my life? Why am I not benefiting? If I do have some intelligence, this man is right. I should make a change in my life. And so he finally decided to start studying, and he started going. And this was the first time in his life, after memorizing the Quran as a kid, he just went into business. He said, this thing changed my life. The few words that Imam al-Sha'bi shared with me changed my life. And it's a very important lesson that sometimes you talk to somebody and you're like, man, I'm not going to waste time with this person. Nothing's going to happen. I talk to this person, no one ever follows my advice. No one ever does anything. What's the point? The thing is, you should never underestimate what a few words of good advice or a gentle nudge, a positive nudge in the right direction towards someone could completely change it. There would be no Imam Abu Hanifa if Imam al-Sha'bi didn't say, you know what, let me just take a few minutes of my time to talk to this young man because he seems like he has potential. And this changes his entire life, and we have an amazing scholar like that. So it's a very good lesson for all of us. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he begins and he says, I'm gonna start studying. But there's all these different circles. There's a hadith class, there's an Arabic class, like poetry, you could learn poetry. Then there's like a fiqh class, and then there's like kalam classes, then there's circles of people who are like debating each other, and all sorts of classes. Like I said, Kufa is a very cosmopolitan region. Everything is there. Different religions are there, different sects are there, different philosophy, everything is there. So he's thinking, he goes, you know what? I'm going to start studying. What should I study? He didn't go back to Imam Sha'bi and say, I'm going to join your class. He said, I'm going to go think about what I'm going to do. So he started studying what's called kalam. And kalam is basically, at that time it was different to what it became later. But kalam is kind of like the science of debate to prove that your sect and your religion is correct. So he thought that, you know what, like this is what I should focus on. I should focus on debating, proving that Islam is true, and proving that the Ahl Sunnah, people of like Sunnis, are correct, and all the other groups, the Khawarij and everyone else, they're wrong. And so he started studying that, and he started going and meeting with people, and he started engaging in debates with other people, debates with people from other religions, debates with atheists, as well as debates with people from other groups, and say, you know what, no, this is the correct thing, this is what the Quran says, this is what the Hadith says, you shouldn't be following that, that's wrong, it's innovation. So he would even go to Basra, nearby city, and he would go for business. And while he's there, he would engage in more debates over there. So he started getting in this field of trying to prove that Islam is correct, trying to prove that his methodology of like Ahl Sunnah, the people of Sunnah, is correct. And he would be arguing with other people. And that's what he got into. And it's interesting because a lot of people who start to get motivated to learn about Islam, they end up going in this direction for one of two reasons. One reason is people want to prove to themselves that, hey, this is correct. I want to make sure I know why I believe what I believe. I must have good reasons for believing what I believe. So that's one good reason why people may get into this field of theology, or like understanding the principles of faith and how to convince others that Islam is true, and this understanding of Islam is true. But then there's another reason which is not good, that people like to debate too, because sometimes you feel good. I proved to that person that my point was right, the other person was wrong, and all that stuff. So this is a natural evolution that many people can go through. He excelled in it to the point where he described himself. He said, I became so proficient in debating other people that people used to point me out and they say, you know what, that's Abu Hanifa. That guy is really good at debating these other groups. He can go and debate with other people. So he said, I started doing that, and after a while I became popular, but then I started thinking to myself, you know what? Something's not right here. Because when I look at the people who are engaging in these debates, I see that they're not very righteous people. The people who are the best at debating, they don't pray really amazing. They don't seem to have much other knowledge. And they don't seem to be like the most righteous and pious people, like we're supposed to be as Muslims. They're not like the companions and they're not like the Prophet, peace be upon him. So they're really good at making their arguments, but they're not very good at living Islam in their daily life. So he was kind of getting to a point where he was getting a little bit annoyed. He's like, this is starting to bother me. So then one day he was sitting with this group of people of kalam and like the people who would debate and they were discussing some issues. And a woman walked up and she says, I have a question for you guys. She says, I want to know how should a woman or how should a man divorce his wife according to the sunnah? What is the correct way? How many times is he supposed to pronounce divorce? So what Abu Hanifa was there and the other people were there. They're like, we don't know. So Abu Hanifa goes, I don't know. You should ask Hamad ibn Abi Salama, who is a fiqh scholar. He goes, he's got a circle of knowledge over there. Go and ask that guy because he specializes in these things. But Abu Hanifa, he said, but I want you to do me a favor. Once you get the answer from him, come back and tell me because I want to know too because I don't know. So the woman, she went to Hamad, top scholar of Kufa, specialized in fiqh, in Islamic law. So she goes and she asks Hamad. She gets the answer. She keeps her promise. She comes back to Abu Hanifa and she goes, you told me to go to him? This is what he said. He said, if a man wants to divorce his wife according to the sunnah, he's going to pronounce divorce one time. She should not be in her menstrual period. He should not have slept with her after her period of purity started. And then he's going to wait 2 more menstrual cycles. And once that's done, she starts her next period of purity. She can go and get remarried. And she's not married to him any longer. She's divorced. So he basically explained the answer was you make one pronouncement, should not be during menstruation. It should be not in a time where they slept with one another, and then she waits. 4 points. Abu Hanifa listens to the answer and he's shocked. And he goes, you know what? I didn't know this. I'm sitting here debating with other people, convincing them that this is right and this is wrong, and I'm becoming a prominent person. People are looking at me and say, wow, look at Abu Hanifa. This guy can debate really well. He can destroy the Khawarij. He can debate the Shia. He can debate atheists. But I don't even know the correct way a husband should divorce his wife according to the Sunnah, according to Islam. Look at my minimal knowledge of Islam. So it's been bothering him that the people who debate, they're not the most righteous people. And now he's like, I didn't even know something like this. So he describes in his own life, he said, from that moment on, I picked up my sandals and I went and I joined Hamad's study circle. And picked up his sandals means they used to leave their sandals outside and they go inside to the study circle, barefoot in the masjid or wherever they were. So he goes, I picked up my sandals and I stopped. I said, I'm not engaging in this kalam subject anymore. I'm going to go and study fiqh. So he went to the class of Hamad ibn Abi Salam, who was the most popular fiqh teacher in Kufa. And he sat down, and Hamad, where did he put him? He put him on the left side in the back row, because all new students, there is a layout to Hamad's classes. So if you're a newbie, you're a noob, you're a new student, you have to be sitting in a far away distance. Once you become a little bit more, you can come a little bit closer, you get on the right side. Top students are going to be right in the front. So Abu Hanifa said, after a very short while, I moved from the section of all the new students in the back left corner. I was put right in front of my teacher, Imam Hamad. And Hamad said, nobody is allowed to sit directly in front of me except Abu Hanifa. And he said, why is that? He said, because all the other students, he used to teach so many things. And he said, they used to forget some things and I used to remember everything. So this is what he was. He basically moved up the ranks because he was very clever and he was a very hard worker. So he started attending the study circle of Imam Hamad, and he progressed so quickly that he became one of the top students. So we'll pause it there, inshallah, and we will continue next week, inshallah ta'ala. Are there any questions on what we've covered so far? He was born in the year 80 AH. We don't know if he was in his late teens or early 20s about this time. Yes.
What were the names of the three companions he met?
The three companions that he met were, let me look it up for you, Suhail ibn Sa'd, Anas ibn Malik, and Abu Tufail. Yes.
What do you believe is the importance of studying like the different schools of thought if they all agree on like the major core things?
So the thing is, it's important to study something that you can follow in your life. That's the most important thing. Once you advance, then it's important to study a little bit more comparison and if you're interested in that subject. But for the average Muslim, they only need to know what to do in their life and follow it. That should be their primary focus. But if somebody wants to specialize in that, they can go and study more. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's also important if you follow Imam Abu-Hanifah, that's your madhab, then you should not mix between madhab in the way you conduct yourself, whether you do, whether it's a group or anything else. Just if you follow madhab, you stick to that.
So that one, we'll cover that later on in the class, inshallah. Anything else? Any other questions about what we covered so far? Okay, we'll leave it at that and we'll see you next week. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.